We spend 1/3, or about 30% of our lives working. Yet the way we work and the nature of our workplaces has changed more in the last 5 years than in the previous 50. Just how will businesses, workers and companies cope with these and future changes? Have you ever wondered what the future would be like? What life would be like? What would the next big idea be? The new way forward? It's time to ask questions about our future. Explore new ideas. Seek out fresh insights. Join us on Future Forward as we discover what matters in this world of ours. We live in exponential times where technology has changed every facet of life, and the field of business is no different. Board meetings have given way to Skype teleconferences, and CEOs today look less like Warren Buffett and more like Mark Zuckerberg. Global management consulting firm Hay Group says these transformative changes are set to continue and move even faster in the future. They have identified 6 mega trends that they say will shape the future of the global business world. These include Globalization 2.0, environmental crises, individualism, digitization, demographic change, and technological convergence.
The interesting thing now is that all these 6 trends will be happening in combination. For example, Globalization version 2.0 will bring a more diverse workforce and global workforce. You will see a demographic shift where the aging population will come, and there's a scarcity of talent. You will see the digital era where the digital natives are a lot more savvy with knowledge, and the power of knowledge will rest with this group. And you see all these 3 combinations is coming, there will be a power shift that's going to happen.
But without a doubt, the biggest game changer among the megatrends is technology.
Technology tends to be a leveler. So if you can do something in Singapore, then you might be able to do it in Bangalore, or you might be able to do it in Dhaka, or you might be able to do it in Rio de Janeiro. People are even talking about telephone companies becoming the new banks, because you can transfer money on a telephone. What a bank has provided in the past is the kind of physical infrastructure, as well as all the kind of back office that goes behind that. But you could potentially recreate that in a more virtual sense.
The range of technology changes that we see on the horizon is expected to add about 0.5 percentage point to potential growth that the world will see. It, however, raises questions around inequality, income inequality, and whether growth is going to be jobless or whether it will come with employment. And it depends on whether you end up owning that robot or whether you're working for that robot. It does have implications closer to home in terms of the way we do business. For the future of business, technology impacts in the way we interact with our people, employees, and also in the way that we interact with our customers.
That is certainly true. According to the Pew Research Center in the US, 51% of American adults conduct banking business online. That's up from 46% just 5 years ago in 2010, and it doesn't stop there.
We are working closely with IBM on the supercomputer they've created called Watson. What Watson seeks to do is to read unstructured text, apply cognitive computing, i.e. constant reiterative learning, to mimic how a human being can think and work. We are working with Watson to try and apply it to the field of wealth management. It's quite clear that when an individual banker thinks about wealth management, the brain capacity is limited to 3, 4 or 5 big ideas. What Watson can do, it reads everything and it can come up with 150 ideas. Buy gold, sell chili, go long Australia, and then it takes all of these ideas and applies them uniquely to each customer position. Think about the difference in the outcomes when you can uniquely take 100 ideas applied to 200,000 customers. Artificial intelligence lets you do that. So that changes the role of the relationship manager.
In addition to employees and customers, technology is now being used to benefit another group of people, entrepreneurs. Local firm MulaSense describes itself as a debt-based crowdfunding platform. Basically, it helps small companies to source for investors when the company is hoping to get a boost of capital.
If you go to a bank, it's one-to-one. You just borrow from the bank. When you raise funds through a crowdfunding platform, it's one-to-many, because it's many investors or many individuals. They aggregate the amounts to fulfill the amounts that the business is requesting for.
And the response from the public has been very positive. In its first funding campaign, Mulasense raised more than double its targeted amount of 100,000 Singapore dollars for an education firm called SMAFS Consulting. Mr. Yong, who used to work in the financial services sector, sees technology as a way to democratize finance.
During the global financial crisis, I became a little bit reflective about the role of finance, and I observed that access to capital and opportunities gravitate towards the big boys. With that, I found that the majority of the financial system are actually underserved. And then when I stumbled upon this concept of P2P lending, I thought that that was a very neat idea, and it was a very practical means of resolving this challenge that perhaps the traditional financial system cannot resolve.
DBS Bank's Piyush Gupta sees peer-to-peer lending and crowdsourcing as just the first step. He says another profound change is coming.
People today talk about Bitcoin, and the biggest thing that people think about is new money, virtual currency. To me, the power of Bitcoin is really the underlying technology, the blockchain technology.
This technology is basically a public database. Rather than being housed by a single financial institution, this database is distributed or decentralized across thousands of servers worldwide. Any changes made to the database from payments sent or received have to be mutually agreed by both parties in the transaction. This essentially eliminates the need for a middleman, such as a bank or financial institution, in making international transactions online.
When you get to that kind of situation, then your question of, so what is the role of the intermediary itself, starts coming to question. I don't need a stock exchange because everybody can transfer shares to each other and everybody keeps track of everybody's shareholding all the time.
Aside from technology, another mega trend identified by Hay Group is Globalization 2.0. Their report says economic power is shifting from old Western economies to the emerging markets of Latin America, Eastern Europe, and in particular, Asia. Rapid growth in these parts of the world is creating a new global middle class with impressive spending power. This is leading to intense competition for new markets as well as for talent.
If you look at the thing around talent is that you see a huge explosion of talent coming from Asia because of the growth of a population. 95% of population growth by 2050 will come from developing nations. There's this shift of balance that's going to occur. And with this shift, the competition for talent in Asia will be a lot more, and also with the aging population in Europe.
But even as technology and globalization changes the face of business, what will become our place of business? What will the workplace of the future look like? Find out after the break. Author Brian Solis, in his book, What's the Future of Business, states that if businesses are not competing for the future, then by definition, they are competing for irrelevance. Never is this more true than in the fierce competition for talent. In their new study on the future of work and the workplace, commercial real estate company CBRE cites attraction and retention of top talent as the #1 competitive advantage in 2030. And to achieve that, companies will need to look at creating smaller, more focused teams, increasing the number of freelancers, and creating suitable work environments.
The typical open office plan, as we've known it for the last 30 years, has always been a compromise solution. It's kind of a one-size-fits-nobody solution. It's trying to be more collaborative, but it's also expecting people to do focused and concentrated work, and it really doesn't work. But the opportunity that you have in a future workplace is the ability to go and work in different places for different kinds of work. I don't think you'll see a massive shift towards people working from home. I think people actually almost more so with the kind of creative work they're doing will bounce ideas off one another. So these modern workplaces will have these highly collaborative areas but these highly quiet and focused areas. When you take away the premise that everybody has an owned position in the office and you think about everybody can sit anywhere, then you can introduce diversity.
According to Mr. Andrew, all these changes are going to happen because of what the competition is doing.
These competitors are quite small companies. I call them the small big companies because you can have 5, 10, 15 people and you can create a product and deliver a service globally that will compete with the very biggest corporations. So when a corporate is facing this swarm almost of these young emerging niche products in these markets that they're trying to maintain, they have to be able to combat that by operating in a similar way. So if you read John Cotter's most recent book, Accelerate, he talks about the need for corporations to take the best of what a big corporate structure can be, which is the hierarchy and efficiency of delivery and great systems, combined, I guess, with brand, but then overlay that with this idea of network structure, very fast, dynamic groups, and this is where this idea of the small group comes out from.
We recognize that creating shared workspaces so that people can integrate and work in partnership and collaboration is extremely important. So we moved away from old-style cubicles, we moved away from offices, we created, more open campus kind seating, we created ability for people to work in a connected way, Wi-Fi, and we've got fantastic productivity from that. It's not related to the physical workspace, it transcends beyond that. The nature of managing workforces is changing from a command control hierarchical management process to a new process, which is a network process. You have to let 1,000 flowers bloom. How do you capture the ideas and energies of people all over the place, let these 1,000 flowers bloom in an integrated way to create value for the customer, means a very, very different way of managing these workforces.
And management styles will not be the only thing to change.
Alibaba, Facebook, Google, none of these companies employ hundreds of thousands of people. They employ 1/10 of the number of people that comparable companies did in the past. And as you think forward, I believe that you'll find a lot more reversal to a cottage industry format, to individual contributors, people who will be able to participate in a networked world and provide services through that network distributed world. You'll find a lot more jobs where people are effectively entrepreneurs, small-scale entrepreneurs, SME entrepreneurs, and that changes the nature of what each of us is going to do in the future.
I think we will see a challenge to the notion of a company. What makes a firm a firm? There's a Nobel Prize-winning economist that did some work on the theory of the firm. Now that individuals have many of the tools of doing business from home, you have a color printer, you have a scanner, you have connectivity, no one says anymore that I need to go to work to send that email or send that fax. So with the tools more democratized, companies may become looser coalition of individuals that assemble and disassemble in projects as opposed to hard-coded large companies.
According to the CBRE study, the challenge for leaders will be identifying the fine line between what must remain within the corporation and what can be sourced outside. Artificial intelligence will also increase in importance, with some experts predicting that 50% of occupations in corporations today will no longer exist by 2025. But losing occupations does not necessarily mean losing jobs.
No one complained when we built dishwashers and washing machines to take away those horrible tasks in our home lives. So why would we complain when a computer comes along and can do the things we don't want to do in the office? What it then allows us to do is you've then got this very powerful tool in the organisation to do much more complex things much more quickly. What you'll start to see happen in the corporations is the disappearance of people who are just there for the sake of turning up and rubber stamping all day. So the kind of work that's happening is going to be much more creative. It's going to be, how do I use this technology to do something that I've never thought I could do before. So it's going to be a much more dynamic, exciting, I think, work environment.
Mr. Andrews says the more visionary companies will leverage on technology to free up their workers from mundane tasks and allow them time and freedom to innovate.
Google lets their staff take 20% of their time a day a week to come up with new ideas, entirely random, on the basis that something might stick in 3 years' time. So I think you'll see more of that philosophy in organisations, and that efficiency that you gain from the automation and the artificial intelligence allows that luxury of that working in that way. But there will be times when the company doesn't pick that magic idea, but they will see it in the market. So they'll need to be very in touch with the market, because there will be these small little organisations, and some of them will want to be fiercely independent and some of them will be happily absorbed. And so I think those big monolith corporations will continue to exist, and they'll continue to collect these little pieces of industry as we go along. They'll have to. That will be their survival.
Up next, we look at how the changing demographics in the world will affect the future of business. All over the world, countries are raising their retirement age. In less than a decade, we will see 4 generations of people working side by side for the first time. These include the baby boomers, those born in the 50s and 60s, Gen X, those born in the 70s and 80s, Gen Y, those born in the 90s and around the millennium, and Gen Z, those born in the 2000s.
What I find interesting is that the stereotypes that you see in the consumer world and the retail world that says Gen Xers are like this and baby boomers are like that don't always play out in the workplace. The workplace is more dominated from an age perspective about life stage. You know, am I looking after children? Am I without children? Am I looking after my parents, or any combination of that? And we see a lot of intergenerational borrowing. People need to find a way to come together and find the common ground, and so older people will borrow cultural attributes from younger people, and younger people might aspire to some of the attributes that older people have.
Younger employees, Gen Yers and millennials tend to be more focused on the future. And having grown up with technology, being connected and tech-savvy is in their DNA. Engaging this diverse workforce is going to be a challenge for companies and will require a new style of leadership.
A style which we call AltoCentric Leadership, where it's a lot more about engaging, it's a lot more about contextual leadership and more shared leadership, as opposed to egocentric leadership, who's a lot more focused about self-reliance and self-ability to manage the organization and directing the organization. So it's a bit like a Ferrari, right? So if you drive a Ferrari using the first and second gear, you probably get where you want to go. However, you probably be better if you move up a bit of a gear to third and fourth, so you can actually realize the full potential of the car. The new generation of workforce is they are very creative, they're very innovative because they grew up in the digital era. So how do you leverage the potential of this younger generation is really how do you use more leadership behaviors like AltoCentric leaders to empower them and bring the best out of them.
The next generation of workers are also more likely to take risks and will choose to change jobs if their expectations are not met. This has led to talent retention becoming the top human resource priority.
Today's generation believes they can make an impact on day one, and you have to create an environment and a platform where they can indeed do that. But there is also another thing that drives today's Gen Z, and that is this recognition that each of us as an individual, or we as business entities, have a role to play which is a lot more profound than just creating profit for the shareholder. I call it being purpose-led. And today's Gen Z increasingly wants to be driven with a bigger sense of purpose. I think shareholder value is a discipline of the past, because I think it will increasingly be replaced by stakeholder value. Now, shareholder is also a stakeholder, but the stakeholder value subsumes the requirements of many people beyond just the shareholder. The community at large, society, customers, employees. And today's Gen Z recognizes that. I think that is going to be quite defining in terms of being able to engage employees, to give them a sense of meaning, and give them a sense of empowerment that they're doing something which is relevant and real.
It's been a natural progression. So it's not just race and gender, but also people from differing circumstances, background, and perspectives that can now contribute to the decision-making process. And diversity makes good business sense. It makes the organization more resilient. We are less susceptible to groupthink and less susceptible to be victim to blind spots. So from that point of view, it's been very positive.
But one worrying demographic trend is the rapidly aging population in developed countries.
We're seeing a polarization in the profile of population across the globe. Countries such as Japan, but also other parts of Asia, are aging at a faster rate than has been the case in the past. And a whole suite of products and services need to be made available to cater to this elderly set of consumers. In other parts of the world, places like India, for example, you have a large young population. In an ideal situation where you're training them correctly, they become employable, they are part of the economy, and these countries reap a demographic dividend. In other cases, if they're not trained, they end up being unemployed, and that contributes to social instability and it becomes less of a dividend in that situation. So population trends is one of the two biggest megatrends that we are facing right now. Everything else is a derivative of that.
But whatever the challenges may be, it looks like the future of business remains positive.
If you look back at the last 15 years, the reality is that technology has been a game changer, but only in an ability to improve not just productivity, but improve outcomes for people. But the transitions, the nature of work to be done, thinking about the job, it means there will be upheaval. There will be winners and losers. There will be some companies and businesses which exist and thrive. Others will perish. And therefore, the next 5 years is going to see even more profound change in the nature of the players, the nature of the intermediaries than we've seen in the last 10 years.
Organization will find the cost of employment being a lot more expensive going forward. And it's about this ability to manage the workforce, having the contingency workforce as well as your stable core workforce. And there are a lot more employees or generation of employees who would prefer to have a lifestyle of more freelance, where my skill sets are a lot more based on what I can do, and I don't want a 9-to-5 job.
For most of us, we have a lot more autonomy and tools and power and control to have an influence in that debate or that dialogue that we've never had before. We're talking about highly creative jobs, we're talking about a strong desire for purpose and meaning and experience in the work, and corporations needing to respond to that. So how that dynamic plays out, I think, will be a key driver, and that will shape the kind of workplaces that we work in, or shape the kind of jobs that we have, and it will shape the way our society lives and works in 20 years' time.
I also expect that I'll be reporting to somebody from Gen Y in the next 3 to 4 years. We should be thinking about what would the bosses in the future of business look like. Thankfully, I think bosses in the future of business will be less about boxes in the org structure and more about leaders.
So the future of business looks to go beyond just bricks and mortar, dollars and cents. Work will be something with meaning and purpose, and profits will be calculated in social good as well. And technology, it will be a tool where the human touch guides it.